So you know, the world of Warhammer, pretty rough place to grow up in. A lot of conflict there. There's a lot of wars, disease, magic, demons, monsters, you name it, they got it. So Warhammer Fantasy, wouldn't really want to live there, but I got to thinking, where would the worst place be to live if you were a human peasant or working class? And we are talking about places that are actually habitable here, so not like, say, a goblin cave, right? No one actually lives in a goblin cave, except for goblins, obviously. But no human chooses to live there. It would be awful. And also, no places where you would just be enslaved immediately or eaten. So no Skaven undercities or dark elf cities as well. You know, being the thrall of a dark elf would be pretty lame, and you'd probably not choose to live there. And so with those caveats in mind, where does your mind go to? Well, for me, it immediately goes to a place called Britonia. So this is a human kingdom. It's essentially fantasy medieval France, but with a heavy dose of Arthurian legend as well. And it has, problems. But I think it's not the worst. For one, if you are even vaguely adjacent to a noble, if you have a relative or something like that, then you get to enjoy a lot of things in Britonia. You get to go hunting, you get to enjoy good food, good wine. You get the quest for the Lady of the Lake and stuff. I mean, I've played World of Warcraft. That sounds pretty baller. But obviously, if you are born a peasant, then Britonia is a pretty awful place to live. For one, you have to farm your field, and God knows I wouldn't be very good at agriculture. You're not allowed to touch a horse at all, which in a huge landmass like Britonia would present some issues. And importantly, you have to give 90% of all your crops and income to your local lord. Or the way Britonians see it, you get to keep 10% of food that rightfully belongs to your lord. So this is a comically evil version of feudalism. I mean, feudalism wasn't great, but come on. Giving away 90% of your food is crazy, and the vast majority of peasantry in Britonia, if this were true, would be starving to death. That's not to say it's not happening. If anywhere was filled with starving peasants, it would be Britonia. But yeah, 90% of food goes to your lord. As a peasant, you're having a rough time of it. You're probably not, engaging in hobbies, or there's definitely not a lot of YouTubers, I guess is my point. And that's just the sort of economic policy. This is before we get into things like law and order. They have a very specific idea of what constitutes justice and what constitutes crime. For example, if you steal your neighbor's sheep, say goodbye to your hand. Have you not paid your taxes this year? Well, I hope you enjoy a hanging, and not as part of the audience. Have you pretended to be of noble blood? I hope you are prepared to enjoy your days and days of torture before two horses rip you apart straight down the middle, pulling in opposite directions. All the while a baying mob laugh and have a bit of fun, because this is genuinely the only type of entertainment that you can get in Britonia. That and jousting. But you're a peasant, you're not allowed to see the jousting. In fact, if you're watching that, you're going to be next week's entertainment for the other peasants, because only nobles are allowed to watch jousting. So if you're watching jousting, then you're pretending to be a noble. You see how this could just create itself over and over again? Ah, sweet Britonia, where the fields are ever green and the Lady of the Lake ever watchful. So, don't pretend to be a noble, is my point. Truly a honorable land. Funnily enough, as extreme as that justice system sounds, it's not too far away from what normal medieval France was actually like. So that's all bad, but it's not the worst. So where else in the world, where could be worse than Britonia? Well, my next thought was Norska. This is basically the North Pole, except it also acts as a borderlands between the mortal realms where, all the humans and all the mortal races live, and the realm of chaos, which is just, the walls of reality have broken down over there. It's not normal. Basically, where the chaos wastes meet space. You live in the middle. So rather than simply dealing with a lot of snowfall, you're also having to contend with hordes and hordes of demons. And the only way to prevent the utter destruction of your village is to pray to dark gods. And more than likely make some blood sacrifices. So just hope you don't draw the short straw. Oh, and of course you're gonna have to prove your worth to these dark gods by fighting in the blood pits. You gotta prove your right to live, and the moment that you do, well, I hope you like traveling. Just hop into a boat and travel down to fantasy Germany so you and your mates can get shot at by Germans. It's a tough career path, I'm not gonna lie. And that's all before we get into the whole chaos mutation element. Ooh. Because you're living so close to the chaos wastes, you're more than likely going to be mutated. It's just a fact of life. You're basically living in Chernobyl, except for the fact that the radiation is actively trying to get you. But on the other hand, it's not all bad. You got some choices here. I mean, for one, you could worship corn or Zinch. See, you got some autonomy here. And all your mates are big, strong gym bros, and they more than likely drink a lot. So the Friday nights are pretty good. Plus, you get to travel the world. You get to see all sorts of impressive sights. Probably die there at them, but you know. And at the end of the day, you have been exposed to a lot of chaos, so you yourself have probably lost your mind. So it's probably quite a bit of fun, really. Short, brutal, but fun. So yeah, I think that's number 2 in the list of worst places to live. So if you take that as the second worst place to live in Warhammer Fantasy, number 1's gonna have to be bad, right? Well yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it is pretty rough, and you might have heard of it already. It's in a little spot in the Empire, kind of. It's disputed. Let's not get into land's law here. This is a place called Sylvania. Lovely, right? And this place doesn't sound too bad. It's right next to the moot, which is where a lot of lovely little halflings live, eating their food. So you know, how bad could it be? Well, unfortunately, the easygoing ways of the halflings did not quite rub off on Sylvania. And that's mostly because the land itself in Sylvania is seeking to extinguish all life, which is pretty tough when you are running a farming community. So let me explain. Sylvania is nominally a part of a county called Stirland, and that is a big county of the Empire of Man, the big main human empire in the old world. Basically the equivalent of the Holy Roman Empire. And Stirland is governed by an elector count. And the current elector count of Stirland is Albrecht Hoff Anderson. Hopped. I don't know. I can't pronounce these names. Anyway, it's not important because I say nominally, right? And that's because Albrecht Ali, he claims de jure ownership over Sylvania. But in practice, he has no authority at all.
You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver.
And in fact, someone else also claims ownership over Sylvania, and they have a little bit more authority. And ironically, more legitimacy as well, if you really want to look into the history books. And this person is a vampire count called Manfred Von Karstein, aka the guy who ended the world in the end times. Or at least was a major contributor to that end. Mostly because he was an asshole. But before he was known as an asshole for ending the world, he was known as an asshole for other reasons. I mean, we're talking about a guy here who treats his subjects worse than a Britonian lord. So this guy is the quintessential vampire count in Warhammer Fantasy. If you've ever heard of vampire counts, this is the main guy. He is the most famous of them all. And yes, just to completely clarify, we are indeed talking about an immortal vampire here. Sylvania is ruled by a f***ing vampire. Fangs, cloak, turn into bat, all that good stuff. I mean, you should have probably seen this coming with Sylvania obviously being a riff on the name Transylvania. Just, you know, a lot less LGBT friendly. Also, he's a fucking wizard. I'm not like a good wizard. He's an evil wizard. He knows necromancy and he collects evil artifacts. He has spent at least a century collecting all the most evil objects in the world. Every single fucking forbidden item he could find, he gotta get it. He's like a hoarder, but for evil. So we're gonna come back to that in a moment. It's gonna be very relevant later. But you are a peasant and you live in Sylvania. So how is it so bad? Well, for one, you have two lords that claim to be your master. One of them isn't around and the other one is known for terrorizing people on the roads and also takes a keen interest in slaughtering disloyal subjects. And also subjects who aren't disloyal, but just nearby. And Manfred Von Karstein isn't the only vampire in town. Oh no. He commands an entire court of vampires. and they all love to wage political wars against one another, so you're likely going to show up as a pawn in their story at some stage. You never want to show up in their stories, by the way. And Manfred does indeed delegate responsibilities to these vampires. So you'll likely be serving one of these lesser vampires who then will report to Manfred. And these lesser vampires will have certain needs. Namely, they'll need to drink your blood. And that's really going to inform how they govern you and your, village or town. See, if you ever read about the vampire count, you'll very rarely hear reference to the word rule or govern. Instead, their governance is often referred to with the word terrorize. And as a loyal servant of Sylvania, you will indeed need to pay your dues. And this isn't in money because, the economy of Sylvania isn't sophisticated enough for a currency system. Seriously, you're bartering with others here. There's not a lot of money going around. But you'll mostly be paying in blood. So taxes are low, you just don't have earnings. I think that's a bad deal, but I can't be sure. See, your vampire lords, they have no need for money. They survive off human blood. And though these vampires will frequently terrorize their subjects, see, there's that word again, mainly by running them down in the street and scooping up all their blood by force, killing whoever it was that they drank from, they're also pretty well organized. And they're going to need a lot of blood, okay? Not just going from door to door here. That's just Friday night. See, in Sylvania, you're not a slave, you're more like cattle. It's that classic idea. If you don't know what a company sells, it's you. So, in Sylvania, you're a peasant, you'll likely have to pay what is known as the blood tax. Now, the form of this tax differs on where exactly in Sylvania you are. In some places, only the rich have to pay the blood tax. And that, by the way, someone who is rich in Sylvania is counted as someone with more than one set of clothes. But they might even be left alive afterwards, so it could be pretty relatively lenient. In other areas though, there's the demand for the firstborn daughter of every single family. Said daughter disappearing and never being heard from again. So, not great. But you know what? The vampires only rule the towns and cities and civilization in Sylvania, if you can call it that. Why don't you just get out there, run away into the woods? Be a forest person instead. Live among the squirrels. That couldn't be possibly bad, right? Well, welcome to Ghoulwood. The name is not just for show. See, the land in Sylvania is actively hostile. It is utterly corrupted. There are packs of perpetually hungry direwolves that roam the forests and streets of Sylvania. So the moment you leave your hovel at night, hope you like being eaten. There are evil mists that descend upon the moors, obfuscating the arrival of ghostly wraiths. Because yeah, in Sylvania, if things weren't bad enough, the dead themselves rise from the grave. The place is cursed. Sylvania ain't pleasant at all. The roads are in a constant state of disrepair. Turns out vampires aren't so interested in major infrastructural projects. Plus, they like when they're chasing a peasant that they trip on the cobblestones. So you're gonna have a lot of trouble traveling very far. The land is so barren that it's almost impossible to grow food, which means that winters are often frequently fatal for most. And every single night you need to board up your windows and doors in order to prevent the ravenous undead and the monsters outside from eating you. And these are like nightmare monsters. We're talking about giant bat creature things, huge crypt monsters, and even undead dragons. And Sylvania is so superstitious that the only thing between you and a zombie bite is your necklace made of onions. It doesn't work, by the way. And even during the day, the place is actively spooky. You basically live in a haunted house, but it's essentially an entire county. As the Vampire Counts Codex puts it, never has a land been so forsaken by nature and the gods as Sylvania. And don't expect to get any sunlight during the day, by the way. See, big man Manfred has employed sinister evil magics in order to block out the sun. Yes, this is basically the scheme of Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. And remember how I said that Manfred Von Karstein is a dark magician who has oodles of evil artifacts? Well yeah, he is one of the most powerful necromancers in the world. Not necessarily something that you want in a leader. And so when you gumball peasant that you are, when you finally die, which, well, finally, probably, likely, and early on die, your duty to him does not end. Oh no! You should prepare yourself, for you are likely to become a skeleton. Because where else do those evil skeletons and zombies come from than the local cemetery? Well, I say cemetery, more likely to be mass graves. Sylvania is constantly grappling with plagues, which means there's a lot of mass graves around. And Manfred Von Karstein has the capacity and power to command the undead. And yes, indeed, Manfred will call you up alive or dead. For you see, the Von Karstein family line is pretty well renowned for its constant warring, to the extent that there's actually a specific term for it. It's known as a vampire war. Now, these vampire wars used to be called things like the First Vampire War, the Second Vampire War, but after a while they just stopped naming them because the thinking was it's just encouraging the guy. So we're not in a position here where, oh, he's a mean guy, oh, he's a pretty nasty ruler, but hey, he maintains the peace. He doesn't keep the peace. He's a warmonger. He's gonna get you and he's gonna make you go fight and die, or you're gonna be dead and fight and live. No, you just die again. His ultimate goal is to capture the very capital of the Empire of Man. Then he wants to be declared emperor and turn the rest of the empire into a simulacrum of what Sylvania is right now. So I guess one of the main benefits of living in Sylvania is that you're gonna get used to these conditions before they might happen to everyone else. That's a rubbish advantage. But here is the good news, sort of. You probably don't mind. So take that to heart. See, since birth, you have been conditioned to believe that all of this is totally normal. Totally sweet, not a problem. In fact, you're probably proud that you live in such miserable conditions. I mean, you should be proud. What other society has such low crop yields and still survives? And these crop yields are so low that it is considered a bit of a social faux pas to eat the flesh of man, but not much more than a faux pas, like leaning on the table or eating with your mouth open. Sylvanians actually refer to human meat as sweet pork. Very delicious, they have a name for it. And this attitude has contributed mostly to a lot of ghouls. There's a lot of ghouls in Sylvanian society, it's a big problem. And these ghouls, they raid villages because they want more man flesh. So, you know, you could become a ghoul. That's a career path open for you. Only in Sylvania. Also, fun fact, most Sylvanians are super racist and they believe ludicrous tales like dwarfs just routinely for fun drown cats. And in a pretty hypocritical sort of condemnation, they also think that halflings frequently eat each other, which it's weird because Sylvanians do eat each other. So why they gotta, they're just racist. I'm also pretty sure that Sylvanians drown cats. Probably like an ill omen or something. But both of those racist ideas are lies, and they believe tons of other lies as well. Just the most worst stereotypes you can imagine. So Sylvania is a rural backwater, and it's said that many of them don't even know that they're part of the empire, or who the current emperor even is. The populace is pretty dumb, and the vampire counts like that. It's sort of by design. Zero education, constant starvation, and pretty generational inbreeding. It'll do that to a society. There are a lot of jokes I can make here, but I'm not going to. Just choose your poison. It's gotten so bad that it's said that Sylvanians wear cod pieces that haven't been fashionable for over 50 years, which is just a really ludicrous thing to really hark on. Wrong colors or something. I don't know, I'm not an expert in cod pieces. Seems like a really weird thing to focus on for me. And this is all, of course, under the perhaps too generous assumption that you're not a mutant. See, Sylvania in its past was seeded with lots and lots of what is known as warpstone. And warpstone is basically magical radioactive rock. People who've watched Smallville know what I'm talking about here. And this means that mutation is super rife in Sylvania. It's everywhere. So if you have the joy of being born a mutant, which is pretty fucking likely, then you have the fun of being cast out into the woods. The woods like Ghoulwood. So just imagine everything that I've said in this video so far. You have to experience that, but you've got a mouth where your belly button is. Or like lobster claws or something. Makes it all just a little bit worse. So yeah, that's Sylvania. It's a pretty rough place. Again, like Norska, it's essentially a nuclear wasteland, but magic. Although you can take some pride in knowing that the dwarf kingdom of Zufbar and the human empire are both on opposite sides of Sylvania. So neither one will ever invade the other because they know to get to the other one, they'll have to go through Sylvania, which sounds like a whole fucking thing. Basically, no one wants to go through Sylvania. So you're sort of like being a wall in a way. That's kind of good. And before you leave, I need to read you this motto and guess where it's from. Awake, O dead, for there can be no rest beneath the earth. Let the splintered bones burrow from the grave pile. Let cold fingers grip time-worn blades. An unseen eye survey the field of slaughter. For your time has come and the dead shall walk again. So where's that motto from? Well, it's the Sylvanian Press, i.e. the local book publisher, so like the equivalent of Penguin Books. So when you're reading your 50 Shades of White or whatever, that's the motto on the book. And I gotta say, they are likely Manfred's own publishing outfit run by skeletons. And so on that note, that is my case for why Sylvania would be the worst place in Warhammer Fantasy to live. Do you disagree? Do you think there's somewhere else that's worse? Let me know in the comments below and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And as always, a huge thanks to my patrons, especially my Space Marine captains, Steve Jackson and Earth Wormia. Thanks a lot for your generous support. Big thanks, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye! Games Workshop Delenda Est.